welcome to another Sparkination conversation. For those of you who may not know, a Sparkination is a spark that ignites passion, that leads to action, that changes what's normal. And I'm delighted today to have my friend and colleague, Dr. Maree Harris, with me. And Maree, you probably remember that I've been doing some research into Indigenous cultures and particularly about storytelling and narratives. And a common narrative that I come across is as within, so without. That's the way the Native Americans describe it, but there's similar language in all the Indigenous cultures that I've looked at. And of course, that's self-leadership, isn't it? And
Yes.
I know that you've written a wonderful little book, Lead From Within, which I think is a terrific way of describing it as well. And so I thought today it'd be great to talk about, because in the book, you talk about 7 soft skills that you regard as the most important. And I thought we'd have a conversation about those. There, number 1 is develop self-awareness. I think that's the number 1 leadership skill. Number 2 is be emotionally intelligent. Number 3 is become proactive. Number 4, become resilient. Number 5, master work-life integration. Number 6, manage your energy. And number 7, become a connector. So I think there are a wonderful 7. Let's kick off, Maree, with developing self-awareness.
Well, I agree with you. It's a really important, if not the most important, leadership skill. But it's interesting that it's only in relatively recent years that we've acknowledged it as an important leadership skill.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, I was thinking the other day that the other ones that sort of relate to that and are part of self-leadership and part of being self-aware are humility, empathy, and vulnerability.
Yes.
Now, if even 5 or particularly 10 years ago, I got up at a leadership development course and said that vulnerability, empathy, and self-awareness, were important leadership skills, I would be laughed out of the room. I would be told I was a fuzzy-wuzzy or a fluffy type of person, and my professional credibility would have been excised. And yet now we're saying these are so important.
I think in some rooms you and I would still be laughed out of them, but not as many rooms as back then.
No,
there's been a shift, hasn't there? I think.
Yes.
Brené Brown's work around vulnerability has probably helped raise that whole level of these sorts of things.
Yes. I think her TED talk. If there's anybody on this call that hasn't watched her TED talk on vulnerability, I think it's a must for leaders to watch, because she like most leaders, they actually fear self-awareness, vulnerability, humility, empathy. They actually fear those things because they think it's going to take them somewhere where they're going to lose control over their professionalism, or they're going to look less a leader than they really want to be. And so they don't want to go into that territory. No. In fact, but what Brené Brown does around vulnerability is she really, in your words, really humanizes it as something not to be feared. She presents it as a real strength to people.
Yes.
And I think all those things are a great strength. All those qualities are really great strengths. But I've found in my leadership development, you'll also, I don't know whether I've sent you, but I've got another program called Lead Your People, and it's empowered leadership in practice.
Yes.
And I've often got to get people into that program first, which is more about topics that open up some of these things before they'll go into the lead from within stuff.
Yes, yeah, I get that.
Almost like I've got to build some trust with them. I've got I've got to let them see that this is not scary stuff. This is really empowering stuff.
I mean, we could have a one conversation about what I think is the trouble here, and that is fear of.
Yes.
And so a whole bunch of people still have a fear of failure. Some people have a fear of success. Some people have a fear of what other people think of them. Some people fear loss of control. You know, we could have a conversation just about that, because I think at the heart of all these reasons why people are not embracing these things, the good news is they're embracing them more than they ever were.
Yes.
But one of the biggest reasons that they're not is this fear of. Fear is a massive thing, and I'm doing I'm writing a paper that'll come out probably in August, maybe September, about how the narrative of our world is about fear, and what's hidden is the narrative of love. And I've been down this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, but I think it sort of links back to what you're saying. We've got to, if we even talked about fear, we probably wouldn't have too many people in the room just now either.
No.
So we've got to come at it maybe from a different angle. And so maybe your become proactive is potentially a starting place for people.
Well, it is, but I think leaders have to be, like, self-awareness is still pretty fundamental.
Yep. You wouldn't have any argument.
Because being, as I see, proactive, it's the opposite to being reactive.
Yes.
So we only have to look at how leaders responded to the COVID pandemic, particularly in the early stages. There were some that, as you say, were totally gripped by fear, and they regressed back into command and control styles of leadership.
Yeah.
And so very, very reactive to what was happening.
Yep.
Now, there are another group that had self-awareness. They became vulnerable. They realized that they did not have the answers here. It didn't matter how many decades they'd been in leadership. This was something that had taken them right out of their comfort zone. It had created enormous fear in them, but it was like they embraced that. They realized, because they were self-aware, that I can't do this by myself. So they actually opened themselves out. They became proactive. They opened themselves out to their teams. They said to their people, they acknowledged this. I don't know what to do. Let's work on this together. Let's journey through this together. They drew on the diversity of their teams.
Yes.
And because of that diversity, they came through with actions that actually got them through this pandemic.
Yes, I think.
And what's more, they built enormous engagement in their people by doing it that way. And they removed a lot of the fear for their people in being vulnerable about their own fear. They removed that in their people. And that like, the way I've been able to get people, leaders, involved in some of these issues from within is when in a workshop, there's one person that stands up and acknowledges their fear. Or acknowledges their uncertainty, that acknowledges the challenges they're facing. And as soon as one person does it, it just allows everybody else to join in. But if nobody does it, then I can't get anywhere. It's like the workshop just stops dead.
Yeah, I bet.
And sometimes I've got to twig someone up in advance to, someone who's already talked to me about this. I said, look, would you raise that in the workshop? Because if you say that, that'll set everybody else free.
Yes, I think we often need a hero not in the old sense of hero leadership, because I think that's a dead idea, but we need someone willing to go first.
Yes.
I know myself, I've gone first myself a few times to encourage other people.
Yes.
And that's why storytelling, of course, is so important, because a story, particularly if it's got some self-depreciating humor in it, that often gives other people the permission. I think you touched on something before, which probably comes back at your number 2 skill. I think we saw some emotional intelligence during the pandemic that probably even the leaders themselves didn't know was there. It just came out because a lot of it's natural, but it wasn't necessarily there before. But I don't know what you think about that, but I saw it come out almost naturally, almost to the surprise of a lot of people. And yet that was part of what stood out for me, for the leaders that did well during the pandemic and those that didn't.
Yes. I think emotional intelligence is much more accepted as a leadership skill, or has come to be much more accepted.
Yes.
But I fear a little bit for that, because there's all these courses on it, and they're measuring it. You know, I am really dubious about the measurement of these sort of skills.
Yeah, me too.
And that old adage, if you can't measure it, it'll never, happen. These are all the skills that you really are very difficult to measure when they're really embedded in someone.
I would think that even trying to measure them is not very intelligent.
No.
I think I forget the gentleman's name. This was a quote that was often referred to Einstein, but it wasn't Einstein, but it was along the lines of, not everything that counts can be counted.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's true of these things. And I think the idea that what gets measured gets done isn't true.
Yes. Yes.
Because you and I have both witnessed all of the skills that we're talking about happening, and the world has been able to see them during the pandemic. And I think that's the thing. These are not skills that we measure, but they are skills that are visible. We know when they're about. We know when they're happening. We know when someone's self-aware, for example. We know when someone's being proactive. We know when someone's being emotionally intelligent. We don't need to measure it because it's visible. And it's being felt, by people as well.
And I encourage self-measurement and self-assessment by people.
Yes.
And
how do you do that?
Well, that's where I think mentoring is so crucially important. Because it's in that mentoring relationship that people are more willing to be open about what they're feeling.
I agree.
And particularly with leaders, CEOs and leaders can't really tell people what they're actually feeling, but they've got to tell someone. And I really like the work of Matt Church, the founder of Thought Leaders Business School. And Matt talks about
I'm a fan as well.
Right, the spoken known problems. Like, these are the ones everybody talks about. Nobody's worried about. The CEOs and leaders are happy to talk about the known spoken problems.
Yes.
But then there's the known unspoken problems.
Yeah.
And these are the ones that keep the leaders awake at night.
They're the ones, yeah, absolutely.
These are the ones that, as they're driving as they wake up in the morning and they think, I don't want to get out of bed. I do not want to go to work today.
No.
These are the ones that cause them so much fear and anxiety and they're the ones that they need to be talking about with a mentor.
Yes. Yes. Well, as you know,
so that they can, because that's the person they can be vulnerable with. That's the person they can explore their self-awareness. That's the person they can talk about why they're being reactive rather than proactive. That's the person. They can talk about the people that trigger them and make them be emotionally unintelligent, you know. And
yes.
So
this is the reason that I've focused on mentoring for 33 years and not on coaching, because I think there's a lot of people who don't need coaching, but they do need mentoring.
Yes.
And I've focused my career on mentoring for that reason. And Matt Church, funny you should say, I've known Matt for 25 years. I saw him as a very young professional speaker. Now, of course,
world famous now.
He's still in the top 5 speakers around, in my opinion. But yeah, I think it's very insightful, because that's all of us. We need someone to talk about the known unspoken. We all need someone to talk to about that. And I think once a leader has that someone, then they become that someone for members of their team, and it opens up a whole new world. I know I've began by mentoring, talking to people about the known unspoken. That's led them to being a mentor for their own people, and I've gone in and helped with that process. And as I say, it opens up with a whole new way of living and learning and leading.
And I think Matt's third area, the unknown, unspoken, is even more important today, because I think what that mentoring process does is it takes you into what I think the unknown, unspoken is a very innovative, creative area that can produce the leaders with their self-awareness and their reflection through a mentoring process. That's the area that they can really meet the needs of these times.
Yes. I don't know how many times in mentoring conversations over the years that something that was previously unknown and not spoken about came up in conversation, and it was a surprise to everyone. You know, me and the person that I was with. And I think that's one of the great things I've found, and which probably leads us into your I think it's the 5th area about mastering life work integration, because I think a lot of the known unspoken and the unknown and unspoken come from personal life and the challenge of a business and a personal life. I call it work-life harmony. You call it work-life integration.
Well, there's no such thing.
I've never met a CEO or a senior leader that I've worked with who didn't have a challenge with this.
Oh, yes. And I think we're in a 24/7 work environment, and there's no such thing as work-life balance anymore. It's about integrating the two of them so that people can be the best version of themselves. And this comes, for me, this comes back to self-leadership, because it's that thing about time flies, but you are the pilot.
Yes.
And Eric Pagan, who says time management is an oxymoron. It's not about managing the time, it's about managing yourself.
Yes.
And people, like, when people talk about not having time and being stressed by time and everything, it's within themselves. They can't say no. They are overwhelmed. They are not looking up. There's no self-care. When you sit down in a mentoring process with someone who's overwhelmed because they can't manage their time, it's not about giving them time management strategies. No. It's about helping them to manage themselves better and to go within themselves and say what, and coming back to the original idea you started with about fear.
Yeah.
It's they fear to go home at 6 o'clock at night because of what everybody will think about them. That as the leader, they're supposed to be there till late. Or they fear, there's a whole lot of fears associated with why they are not managing their time better.
That one you just mentioned, fear of what other people will think of us, has been named in many papers I've looked at as the #1 fear. Whereas if I'm self-led and I'm comfortable in my own skin, I have awareness, I have intelligence, I'm proactive, I've got work-life integration, I don't need to fear what other people will think.
And that last comment you made where you brought all these in, you don't actually have one of these characteristics without probably having a whole lot of the other ones.
No, that's right.
Like they're all integrated together.
Yep.
You can hardly say, look, for the next 12 months, I'm going to focus on self-awareness. I'm going to focus on because all these other things will come into that process.
Yes.
Can't isolate one from the other.
It's almost, I'd like there to be sort of, there's some sort of wholeness about them together, isn't there? They all work together in a bit of a symphony, really, don't they?
Yeah.
Self-awareness might be the conductor, but the whole orchestra's got to be involved. Otherwise, there's no symphony. I wonder what, because one of your 7 is about managing your energy. I wonder, and you did, that just sort of sparked in me when you said they've all got to be going together. But managing our energy kind of drives the others in a way, doesn't it?
It fits in with the time. There's a classic article, I think it was originally in the Harvard Business Review, that I also hand out to leaders by Tony Swartz.
I think I know the
on manage your energy, not your time.
Yeah.
And like the thing about energy, time, we've got 24 hours in a day. That's all we've got. And if we focus on what we're going to do with that 24 hours in a day, a lot of leaders are going to be totally overwhelmed with that. But our energy can be boundless. We can have huge amounts of energy depending on how we cultivate it and manage it. And so people that, for leaders particularly, it is crucially important that they learn very constructive ways and make real commitments and highly prioritize the management of their energy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting in recent times, at even an academic level, when I say an academic level, I mean a theoretical level, how much is being talked about the importance of sleep, you know, and particularly for in leadership. It's become a bit of a leadership skill, getting enough sleep.
Well, I think the whole area of, I'm seeing a shift from mental health being talked about in a negative way to well-being being talked about in a positive way. And of course, diet, exercise and sleep are probably the top 3.
Yes.
And I know myself, a lot of people I knew, you know, we were unhealthy because we weren't eating the right food for us, and we weren't exercising properly, but particularly we weren't sleeping properly.
Yes.
And I was actually at my doctor's yesterday, and I was watching Norman Swan on the TV in the waiting room. I don't know whether it was a pre-programmed thing or what. I wasn't there long enough to work out, but he was talking about how it's not necessarily the hours that you sleep, but the quality of sleep.
Yes.
And there's a lot more research, perhaps what you were referencing about that. I know I slept 8 hours last night, and I woke up this morning feeling refreshed. And so 8 hours still might be working for me, but yeah, it is the quality of sleep and understanding, REM sleep and a whole bunch of other things, which
and the understanding the things that disturb our sleep. I mean,
yeah,
I've talked with leaders who are checking their phones all night long. They'll wake up and check their phones.
How can that possibly be good for well-being?
So they're so hyped up, it's talking about managing energy and being focused and,
I can tell you that
total lack of self-awareness that they think that it's good to check your phone.
This is not going to bother me during our call or at any other time because it's switched off.
Yeah, mine is too.
And because it's always there, but I've trained myself to not look at it. I know with emails, when emails were a popular thing, they're not so much nowadays, but I've always told people I only email twice a day, first thing in the morning and last thing before I finish work. And if you want me to email at any other times, then it won't happen.
And some people are putting that on the bottom of their emails now, which is good. Very good, because what's happened is since we've had email, and worse still, text messages,
or now Slack and so on,
they expect an answer immediately.
Yeah. Well, who made that rule?
Well, we have to manage it, don't we?
We do.
Their emails are being sent to us, so we have to set up the guidelines for.
If this doesn't enhance the human experience, in my view, any form of technology, if it doesn't enhance the human experience, then I don't want to know about it.
Yes.
I say to people, the trouble with artificial intelligence is it's artificial. It's not real. Now, I'm not discounting, and I've been a beneficiary of the wonderful artificial intelligence that's in medical machines, for example. I'm not dismissing artificial intelligence, but I think we've become overwhelmed by technology, and we need another one of your skills to fight against it. That is to be resilient. We've got to fight technology that controls our lives and stand up for technology that enhances our lives.
I've got a particular understanding of resilience, which I often get asked to talk about resilience, particularly over the last 5 years. And
it's another one of those popular topics, isn't it?
Yes, but often when I tell people, or the person that I'm relating with who's organising it, what position I'm going to take, they don't want me anymore. They want a light touch, what I call a light touch resilience. So they want me to talk about how to manage a diet and self-care and well-being and positive mindset, all of that sort of stuff. For me, resilience is a psychological strength and a mental toughness. Yeah. So
I'm with you.
During the pandemic, I'm almost finished a book on this. During the pandemic, I think this is what we saw, that you have to make decisions and again with self-awareness and all these qualities. But once you've made a decision, it's having the strength and the confidence and the belief in yourself to follow through on that. Yeah. And to come out the other side strong, healthy, mentally well. Yeah. And I think there's like it really starts that they're doing it in schools now. which is fantastic. But the thing about resilience is that it accumulates over a lifetime of dealing with adverse situations. Look, we used to talk about bouncing back.
Yeah.
You can't bounce back nowadays. Resilience is not about bouncing back to where we were.
No.
And neither can we bounce forward, which was another way we explained it, because where's forward nowadays? Surely we're not bouncing forward to where we were before the pandemic, are we? Or
I think these are
where do we bounce forward to?
I think these are cliches. It's a bit like normal. You know,
Yes.
we're not going back to normal.
Yes.
And anyone that talks about that way to me is misguided, because and there is no normal anyway, really. You know, I wrote the book Changing What's Normal.
Yes.
And part of the reason that I wrote that book was to suggest to people that if you're stuck in sameness, then you're not being the best, you know, version of yourself. And I think we all have to need resilience. It's like, you know, when we were kids, you know, we played in the dirt and we built up something in our immune system.
Yes, yes.
That now no kids are allowed to play in the dirt. And I think we and that's not to say that there aren't other ways of looking at these things, but I think I grew up in an environment where you had to be resilient to survive. And I think what it started to form in me was a mental toughness that stayed with me ever since. And
then the next time you face a situation like that, that mental toughness is increased, and you know, you get along your life, and it's as we go through developing resilience, we're actually fighting our inner demons.
Yeah.
But we get to a point where we just know we have to work this way. We have to be psychologically strong in doing this, responding to it, whatever it is. It just comes naturally to us, as all these things do. Doesn't mean they don't challenge us, but we can work with them to get through them.
Yep, I agree.
You know?
I think resilience is a human quality, but it's a bit like muscles. If you don't exercise them, they wither.
Exactly. I remember my 6-year-old grandchild son coming home from school. I said, "What did you do today, Fraser?" And he said, "I wore the resilience cape all day long." I said, "How did you do that?" Because this school had capes with qualities that the kids wore. Yeah. He said, "Oh, well, I had to do, I can't remember what it was, but it was something he had to do." And he said, "I couldn't do it. And the teacher came and she saw I couldn't do it. And I said, I can't do this. I'm not going to do it." She said, "Fraser, you can do it. I know you can do this."
Yeah.
He said, "So I tried and I did it." And that's the beginning of resilience, you know?
No doubt.
And when I have people, leaders coming to me, I often work with something like they want to exercise, but I start and then I stop. So what happens? So it's the alarm goes off at 5 because that's what they've decided they're going to get up and exercise.
Yeah.
But immediately the alarm goes off, what do?
Look at their phones.
They become emotionally unintelligent.
Yeah.
And they lose any sense of mental toughness and psychological strength. And they start saying to themselves, "Oh, I could do it later on the day. Oh, look, I didn't get much sleep last night. Look, I'll get someone to do it with me." They use every excuse, they tap into their weakness.
Well, I think that's another fear. It's fear of being found out.
Yeah. They do not, whereas what I try and get them to do is to be psychologically strong, to be mentally tough and act on the decision they made the night before. And that's that's sort of the beginning to me of resilience.
Yes. Yes. Now there's one we haven't touched on, and we're kind of approaching our sort of time. One we haven't touched on is about being a connector.
Yes. And I have a very, very strong belief that the only way to really be successful in whatever way we understand success, and in whichever field we want to be successful, is by surrounding ourselves with empowered and empowering people.
No
we
doubt.
cannot go it alone.
No.
Whether it's a coach, a mentor, a mastermind group, a peer support group, an organisation we belong to, whatever it is, we have to find that. And LinkedIn, I'm appalled at the way LinkedIn operates often, the way the connections happen. You know, it's like if Maree, I want to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If I grabbed a pile of business cards and I went to a function and I walked around the room saying, I'm Maree Harris, here's my business card. I'm Maree Harris, here's my business. People would chase me out. I'd get such negative feedback from that.
Yeah.
Yet that's how people connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, you know, it's service to self, not service to others.
Mm.
And so, you know, I don't personally connect with those people.
No, I think it's about building relationships with people, mutually supportive relationships.
It's connection, but it's / belonging.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
One without the other kind of almost doesn't work. I'm amused, you know, by social media when I get asked to join the conversation. Well, there isn't a conversation yet, because you know, these are requests. You know, I'd like you to join the conversation. I had one the other day about such and such. Well, what conversation? No,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think there'll be something else. I mean, LinkedIn is there's some positives about LinkedIn. That's the only social media that I now play in. I don't play in any of the others.
I'm a great fan of LinkedIn, actually, from a professional networking point of view. But I actually, if I send an invitation to someone, I tell them why I want to connect with them.
Yes.
How I've come across them, where it was that I met them, and why I want. And then when they reply back to me and accept my invitation, I then often follow on with a bit more, because you've got such a limited amount when you send the initial connection. Then I develop out a bit more about how I came to come across them, and what it was about their work that I really valued.
Yes.
And if they then respond to me, we've got a conversation going.
True.
If they don't respond to me, then I know they don't want to keep the conversation going.
True. Yeah, I think I'm amused. Like, I think I've got 3,000 connections on LinkedIn, but really I have 150 relationships.
Yes.
The other, whatever, I really don't know who they are, most of them.
Yes.
Because in the early days, there was, you know, everyone was connecting with everyone.
Yes.
And I think I mean, most of my relationship building is done offline. Using this as a telephone is one way that happens. And of course, you know, meeting people in person, although we're still not doing much of that at the moment.
I am wondering what COVID and the online virtual experience is going to do to the realness of our connections. I am a big face-to-face networker. I have been all my life, all my adult life. And COVID was a disaster for me in terms of face-to-face networking.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to be getting back into face-to-face networking, but I'm now at this stage of my professional life very selective about the face-to-face networking events and experiences I engage with.
Yes.
And the quality of the people in those who attend those events or engage in those experiences.
Yes. I don't participate in any of those things anymore because I find them self-serving.
Yeah.
But I think also there's a level of consciousness, like I do now 90% of my work online. And if there's a consciousness about the reality of the connection, and I've got 3 peer groups, for example, we talk about this all the time. It's about being real humans. The fact that we're in a room using technology is irrelevant. What's more important is we're in the room having conversations about being the best humans that we can be. Now, we do, a couple of the groups, we do meet physically from time to time. That always enhances the experience. Bit difficult. The third group are mainly 12,000 miles away. So that's more difficult these days. But I think the point I'm making is we have a conscious, open-hearted conversation all the time, that the reason we're in the room using technology is we want to be the best humans that we can be. And so we've kept that realness, that authenticity, even though we're using Zoom. I think a lot of people have forgotten that, and a lot of online meetings have become boring, waste of time sessions. And then I hear that terrible thing, I'm sorry, mate, I've got back-to-back. Well, why in a world where well-being's number one, would you be having back-to-back meetings? It's beyond me, because there's no need for back-to-back meetings. I think busyness has become a sin of so many leaders. There's no need to be busy. The issue is to be productive. But anyhow, Maree, I think we're kind
Can I just comment on that though, Ian?
Yeah.
Your perspective on that is different to mine. And like you have found the online experience very, very good for you.
Well, I made it so.
I haven't. And I think there is, as I'm talking about this with a lot of people at the moment, and they're saying this, that there is quite a difference. Some are finding it great, others won't. Whereas my mentoring, why I dropped all my workshops and didn't go online with them during COVID and accelerated my mentoring, most of my mentees wanted live sessions. Yeah. So as soon as there was a break, we were able to organise a face-to-face mentoring session immediately, whereas you couldn't organise a workshop immediately. Yes. So I think people need to do what sits well with them.
Yeah, I agree. I still do the face-to-face, but it's on request. I don't look for face-to-face, and I've got personal reasons, as you know. But yeah, I think, and that's the thing. It's got to be horses for courses. You've got to do what works best for you and your client. And if that's different to the way I'm doing it or the way someone else is doing it, then I don't think that matters. No, I think there are good things in all of the different approaches, and it's just a matter of finding what works for us, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And I mean, I do lots of Zoom stuff around the country where I can't do face-to-face with people. No. Only locally, and in Melbourne, Ballarat and Bendigo that I would do face-to-face.
Yes, and I'm pretty much the same. So, Maree, I'm not too sure where this will go in terms of whether we might run a workshop, maybe for those 3 places, a local workshop.
Yeah, good.
and because we've both got some a fair bit coming up recent, you know, in the not too distant future. So let's see where we go. Do you have any kind of parting wisdom that would be valuable?
Only that this conversation could go on forever and ever.
It could. I'll put some links to your Lead From Within book and your other materials.
Yeah. Yes.
And we'll try and find some links to Matt Chirk's work that we mentioned as well, and also that article by Tony Schwartz. I'll look at those and put them below this video.
Yes, I think they're well. And Brené Brown's vulnerability TED Talk.
Brené Brown, yeah, we'll put.
I think that's a good one to have.
We'll put some resources there. Well, it's been wonderful.
Yeah,
Maree, to
been good, Ian. Yes,
I know you've got a big operation coming up. I wish you well with that.
Thank you.
And we'll speak again soon.
Righto. Thanks, Ian.